everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Experience. As always, super ecstatic and excited to have you on to these where I bring on high achieving entrepreneurs, investors in the industry, and also do my experience share as an investor in the industry as well. And today we've got Lane on, and I was going to go ahead and try and pronounce his name, but I know I'm still going to butcher it. So welcome to the show, Lane.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sterling.
Yeah, and for the audience, could you pronounce your last name for me?
Yeah, Lane Kawaoka.
Okay, perfect. And so Lane he's with SimplePassiveCashflow.com. You can see that in the background there. He has just over 3,500 units with the valuation at a quarter of $1 billion, and that is a billion with the B. And he is also a avid CrossFitter, such as myself. I don't do it as much as I used to, but so yeah, Lane, could you go ahead and give everyone a brief 5% on yourself that's been those pivotal moments that shaped you to who you are now and how you got into real estate?
Yeah, I mean, I was an engineer that didn't like my day job, so I stumbled upon real estate investing, just rental properties in my early 20s. And that was really my first pivot. And then my big pivot after that was once I got up to London rentals, I got rid of the rental properties and went into syndications and multifamily. And that was kind of, I don't know, maybe the 1% after that.
Gotcha. And before all of this, what were you doing before you made the transition to real estate? You mentioned you're engineer, or what was that type of background that you had from that sense?
Yeah, I did this all while I was working a full-time day job. I mean, I only quit my job maybe a little over a year ago. So for I started investing in 2009, bought my first rental property, and while I was working the day job, and a lot of it was because I was never home, was traveling on the road all the time. So I had this property that wasn't really, I wasn't really living in. So I lived in it I rented out for $2,200. The rents were $1,600, and I think it was like 24 at the time. That was a lot of beer money.
So an accidental landlord or investor, you would say.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It's hard. Like, people are trying to get into it. I mean, I got kind of fell into it. I got lucky.
Mm-hmm. And then since from that's when you got the bug and decided, hey, let me go purchase some more single families, or did you make the jump straight to syndication from that present time?
Yeah, I continued to buy 10 more units after that. I just did it one by one, saved up money. That was from 2009 to 2015, 16. And then around 2016 was when I started to scratch my head a little bit on thinking like, well, these single families are kind of a pain in the butt. With the evictions and, the properties were appreciating in value. So I had a lot of debt equity sitting in them. And it was just such a pain to refinance, or 1031 or sell it and get the equity out.
And where were these? Were these all in one market? Where were they based out of, the holding?
The first 3 units were in Seattle, where I lived. And then around 2012, I pivoted to do out-of-state remote rentals. So I picked up several in Birmingham, several in Atlanta, and then several in one in Indianapolis in Pennsylvania. And,
Gotcha.
And that was when, we kind of transitioned to more of a remote renter or landlord.
Gotcha. And how were you able to manage all that? Because I feel that most people may be in a market such as Seattle, maybe somewhere else on the West Coast, East Coast, where those price points just don't make sense. How were you able to manage from doing that from afar?
Yeah, so I had professional property management, 3 property managers to be in those cities, one for each. And it was kind of a pain managing those relationships with those guys, keeping them accountable. I mean, residential property managers are nothing compared to commercial property managers in terms of their sophistication and professionalism and their ability to go get, even better contractors. So, I kind of found the transition night and day, but, it's really hard to switch from something that kind of works and
Gotcha.
that really only 1 or 5% of the world's population does in the first place. You don't really have the peer group around you. I mean, they're not going to be on the free Facebook groups or the free internet forums or the local RIA, right? A lot of those guys are barely house flipping. or wholesaling, you know?
Gotcha. Yeah. And from that is when you came accidental landlord and then you really started to ramp up your acquisitions a bit from that point is did you have any limiting beliefs at that time? I'm just trying to think how you were able, okay, now I'm going to make the shift and start acquiring. Did you think that, okay, I need a large amount of capital or I don't have the, well, let me take a step back. Did you start doing education at that point in time to gain the knowledge and then you started acquiring? How did that work?
No, so I did it all by myself. You know, the first rental I bought, 2009, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I didn't even know what rent to value ratio was or 50% rule. I just bought it and it got lucky. But then I started to devour all the podcasts and the books the next few years. And that was kind of where I got in my head. I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't buy in Seattle. You know, that's just where suckers buy who want to gamble on appreciation. So that was where that whole idea went. But, you know, in 2015, 16, when I was making the transition to multifamily, you know, it was sort of getting around people. And I did kind of get into groups where I had to pay to play, where I got around other, you know, high paid professionals, doctors, lawyers, engineers like myself. And a lot of them were 10, 20 years older than me. And, you know, we're kind of walking the same path. And that was a big thing for me to get around my peer group. Folks of, you know, kind of did people who did what I did and kind of just copying what people did. And what I realized is, you know, accredited investors, wealthy individuals don't buy rental property. That's a pain. They passively invest in multiple, you know, dozens of property of deals. And that's how they get diversification, and they don't even do anything.
Yeah. And I love that standpoint you mentioned about surrounding yourself with individuals and just being able to soak in all of that knowledge. It's a form of mentorship, you would say, in a way, because they say that, I believe it's Zig Ziglar or maybe Jim Rohn, that the 5 people you surround yourself with, you can be within about 5 to 10% of your actual net worth just based upon that.
Right. Yeah. So your network is your net worth.
There we go. Simple enough. You just broke it all the way down just to that little phrase.
Yeah. I don't know if it's true, but, you know, it tends to be that way, where if you hang out with rich people, you sort of become rich too.
Or if you hang around someone who is healthy and they eat healthy, you'll tend to, let's say you're at a dinner table, for instance, and everyone at the dinner table is like, when dessert comes around, everyone's like, nah, I'm good. I've got to do CrossFit after this. And you're like, nah, I'm not gonna, which you normally would. And so
exactly.
And so what principles were you able to take from the single family side? Let's say failures ultimately that helped you, that set you up for success when you made the shift to multifamily.
Yeah, I think one thing was, you know, when I came into it, I didn't really trust anybody. Like the whole syndication thought, where you kind of put money in as a passive and you kind of just trust them to do their job.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really buy that initially. So I was like, I'm gonna get my buddy and we're gonna go after like a 30, 40 unit and buy it ourselves. We don't trust nobody.
In Seattle, or you were still looking at
we lived in Seattle, but you know, nothing works down there. So we were looking more towards like Dallas at the time. You know, this was back in the golden era where anything worked still.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we were looking around and you know, stuff in the 20 to 50 unit range, something we could take down ourselves. But like the problem was there's just too much other mom and pop investors in that arena, that the pricing wasn't nearly as good as when you got above 80, 100 units. And then combine that with the fact that like the lending is horrible, you know, when you're 5 to 100 units, because you're not able to get the non-recourse agency debt, the Fannie Mae Freddie Mac loans. And then at that point I was kind of like, why are like these syndications getting this really sweet debt and folks like myself aren't?
Yeah. And at that time, Lane, did they have the small balance loan that was out at that time? Because I know through Freddie Mac, they offer, if it's $1 million is the cutoff. I don't know if they have any specific units or anything, but if it's 1 million in terms of the loan that goes out, then that they will be able to satisfy that.
Yeah, they had that, but I was kind of, I mean, and the next big bearer was like, all right, me and my buddy, we can't qualify it because we never done it before. And it's
Gotcha.
kind of
Yeah.
like, okay, this isn't going to work,
Uh-huh.
right? We got to bring, if we're going to keep doing this, 20 to 50 unit deal ourselves, we're going to have to bring in another guy to KP or loan guarantor the loan with us. And that's what we didn't want to. We wanted to eat our own cooking. So at that point, I probably spent like 18 months just analyzing deals, talking to brokers, doing that whole shabazz that most people do and most people fail at. And because they get to this point where I did, where it's just kind of like there are no deals, right? The
Hmm.
brokers aren't going to give you a deal because you're just a sucker who has a bunch of single family homes.
And at this time, you're still at your full-time job. And
Right.
is your partner, or your buddy at that time also, is he full-time in the business, or also has a full-time job too?
Right. We were just full-time suckers trying to do this on the side. Like,
Gotcha.
I mean, who in their right mind would want to invest with us too, right? It's a couple of absentee landlords, drinking coffee up in the clouds in Seattle while we got a 50 unit or 100 unit in Dallas or whatever.
Hmm.
I wouldn't invest if they're not there. But that was the kind of the point where it's like, all right, maybe what we realized is like we weren't able to make relationships with brokers. Like for people who want to do this from California or Washington or Portland, dude, this ain't gonna work. You got to move your butt to these areas because you have to visit with the brokers. Not only do you
Hmm.
have to build a relationship with them, which I personally don't really like, and that's just not my skill set.
Of course.
But you also have to, like, when a deal comes up, you need to go visit it because that broker is trying to say, oh yeah, this guy Lane, he came and he's seen the property. He's not just putting a blind offer. They're just gonna chuck out the window
Hmm.
from some remote landlord or remote investor.
Yeah, and I would say that's vitally important. What you just mentioned is operators trying to, even on the single family side, which I exited out of all my single families, I was close to 150. Imagine that was quite a bit of a pain with managing all those. And that most people, when they're buying deals, they have never visited the city and they have absolutely no clue what they're investing in. And they're trusting too much on the third party property management company. But I'm just a firm believer that, and I would like your insights too, is trust but verify. But you're making an investment, so why not pay for whatever the plane travel or just to live there?
Yeah, but most guys are trying to do this on the side of their high-paid day
Gotcha.
job, right? That's the reality of it. Or the other profile is it's the broke guy who has no job to begin with, and $700 for a plane ticket and a hotel is a lot of money for the dude.
Yeah, understood.
So I mean, if you're serious about this, you can't go half-heartedly into it. You got to kind of move to the area or commit to flying up there at least, once every month, maybe every other month once you kind of build a rapport with the guys.
Yeah. So how does it how does it look when you take down that first multifamily deal? Is it you use friends, if you use outside investor money, you use your own cash? How do you structure it? What does that look like? We don't have to get so much into the weeds, of course, but
I
how
mean,
did
I
you end
think
up picking?
first time, like I just was a passive man. Like
Gotcha.
none of this, none of this. We're gonna do it, which I see a lot of people say they do. I don't really. It's never the story. I think people sort of ease into it as sort of a silent partner, and then they kind of add value to the partnership, and they kind of ease their way into the GP that way.
Gotcha. So could you talk us through how that process worked for you to where you were ultimately able to, one, you started as a limited partner more on the passive side, and then you're able to leverage that experience to then make the transition yourself to being the actual general partner. How did that look?
Yeah, I mean, the one good thing that I had going for me initially was I knew how to underwrite deals because I was kind of looking for them. And
Gotcha.
I realized that, like I said, you got to realize what you're not good at and what you're. I was geographically at a disadvantage.
Gotcha.
And I didn't like building relationships with brokers. So I figured out what I was good at was I had an investor base that wanted to invest with me, that trusted me, and I was able to underwrite deals and catch all the syndicator tricks. Reversion cap rates, I know what occupancies to plug in. I know what assumptions that I need to look at so this syndicator doesn't screw around with me or my capital group. So
Got
that was how why people kind of invested along with me. And then they wanted representation inside the general partnership. And that was a good opportunity for me to learn too. So I did that, you know, probably half a dozen times. And then I would say at that point, I was kind of like, wait a minute, I kind of know a thing or two with this stuff. And the thing with multifamily investing as a lead, like it's really not that much hard work if things are going really well. But if things are going bad, a lot of it's like who you're going to call, what kind of service provider you're going to call, or what kind of like technique are you going to do with your property manager. I mean, it's just like a manager role at work. You know, the managers shouldn't do the work, but they need to be able to have the experience to know what to do to get their team working.
Got it. Yeah. And those of you, I would highly recommend rewinding that section. Of course, this whole lane just dropped absolute bombs from that standpoint, especially with the being of value starting as a silent partner, more of on the passive end, and then really able to gain that knowledge and then also exchange value as well. And then you're able to get some value in exchange, and was able to take that experience and then leverage it for once he was able to go out and do it on his own. So Lane, how does that first deal as a general partner look for you? Was it, what was the unit size? How'd you end up taking it down?
I think it was like 150. Again, I didn't really do too much, right? Like I'm kind of sitting in the jump seat and just kind of watching. And I'd say it's very similar to like my experience when I did like my first turnkey rental, right? Like with the turnkey rental, you know, some people have started with that. Great way to start investing. You know, like somebody else fixes up for you and you just take it over. Sometimes a company will even put a tenant in there for you. So it's kind of training wheels for an investor. So as far as like, you know, how did what lending broker we went with, all the closing process, I don't know, man. I mean, it just kind of went, it just was already there. I just adopted a working tricycle, and I just hopped on and I just started writing. So a lot of my education was on the more on the operations side. Once we got started down the road, which is, you can do it either way, right? You can focus on acquisitions or you can focus on operations. Either way, you need the education. But if I were to do it, I would just start off with something that's working in the beginning that somebody else has gotten, you know, working down the road, and then learn the operations piece while not everything is breaking on you.
Got it. And would you say you take more of a principle such as when Warren Buffett buys companies, he is willing to pay a little bit more, but everything is you're buying a great asset in a great location versus buying a asset in a great location, but you've got to put in all this work in order to get that value?
Yeah, I think my strategy was kind of investing with the right people, and then, you know, people with track records. So the key to doing that is building your own network of other passive investors, other high net worth accredited investors, and just taking it from the horse's mouth, right? A lot of these guys, they don't, you know, you build a organic relationship with somebody, they're willing to help you out, and maybe you can go, hey, I'm going to go into Bob's deal there. Have you worked with Bob, right? You know, and then in the beginning, it's hard because there's no even value exchange. But as you start to build up your track record and your experience level, maybe you can reciprocate. But you know, it's hard, right? Because when you're trying to break in, nobody knows who you are, and you're just another guy who's just gonna be in this for 6 months and never do anything. So there's probably some upfront resistance to kind of building relationships, but you got to keep providing value to people who probably don't need you, I think is the problem.
Got it. Okay. And how, for you, the value exchange you were able to bring to the piece was, did you see that those initial people you provided value to needed help with underwriting, or you just took over and said, hey, this is my skill set, just start to send me over deals and I'll jump in there?
Well, I'm talking about the guys who are just passive investors is who I built relationships with first.
Okay,
they're not doing anything. They don't need me, right? That's the key. And it's kind of a roundabout way, and it's definitely the long game. But if you want to kind of build your network, I'd say that's the way to start, because that's how you're going to find the reliable deal operators from that standpoint.
Okay, understood. And so, Lane, from a tactical standpoint, how are you able to find deals in today's environment? Is it just through the broker relationships primarily?
I mean, today syndicators just bring me deals.
Yeah,
I mean,
simple enough.
they just court me. They know who I am. I mean, when I come into a deal, it's $5-10 million is what follows me. So
Gotcha.
that's very impractical advice to folks getting started. And I would say it's just more about like just adding value initially.
Got it. Okay. So what I'm getting, Lane, is you're able to get in the GP role, but you're more bringing the equity to the deals. Is that
Right,
one piece of the
right,
puzzle for you too? Okay.
right. But
Gotcha.
I've been becoming more of a pain because I want control.
Got understood. Okay. And so from that standpoint, we're going to go ahead and get into some quick firing round in terms of just some overall questions for you that are very quick hitters. The first one being is, what is one unusual, well, I asked this at the beginning, but what is one absurd thing that you love to do or unusual?
Um, I don't like to wake up early, man. I don't know, just like people wake up at 5-6 o'clock. I mean, I'd rather stay up late, you
Got
know.
it. Yeah, everyone's different. I feel that they're starting to really push that you got to wake up, early bird gets the worm, but I feel everyone's different. So I'm a night owl too, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, man, just let me be me, you know. I check emails my first couple hours out of the day. That's what they say you're not supposed to, but I have to do that, you know, like
And so what is one common myth that you hear in the industry that you can debunk? Multifamily. Let's use multifamily.
I would say they say that everybody can do it. I'm not a big believer. If you haven't owned a rental property and your net worth isn't $200,000, you got to go own a rental property. You got to get your net worth up there.
Got it. Okay, understood. And the last one is, why do you believe we're here on this earth, Lane?
I don't know. I mean, most of us here are just here to exist and, you know, do what feels good. I mean, nothing wrong with that to me. If that's your goal, that's your goal. But some people believe that they're here to do something bigger. Um, you know, I mean, it's just, I'm not saying that anything's wrong if you want to just chill out, take pictures of your food and put it on Instagram all day
Fly under the
long.
radar. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing's wrong, but just be aligned with what your goals are, right? If you just want to work your day job, cool. You know, keep doing that. But if you don't like your day job, then do something about it. I
Yeah,
think
or you're
that's where,
complaining about it. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's where my bad rub comes in. Like, you know, don't say you want something if you're not going to put in the effort.
Gotcha. So it's not one of those, gosh, what is it, law of attraction, but you only think it and it's supposed to come. No, you got to actually put in the work.
Yeah, if the law of attraction was like legit and real, the thought of the opposite would be true. Like if you think of bad things to happen and it happened, then it would be true, right?
Agreed. Yes, we definitely would not want that. And yeah, so how can people find you, Lane, or contact you?
Yeah, they can check out my podcast at simplepassivecashflow.com. We're mostly passive investing. We don't really try and get too much into the extra deal side. Most of us are, you know, high paid professionals, doctors, lawyers, engineers. So we kind of do more wealth building techniques with tax and legal and stuff like that.
Okay, understood. And yeah, I appreciate you being on the podcast, The Real Estate Experience, dropping absolute bombs. And yeah, I've heard tremendous things about you, and just kudos to you on a job well done with just your overall reputation. I see you just about everywhere. So thanks so much for being on.
Cool, man. Thanks for having me, Sterling.
All righty. And those are on YouTube. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button so you can be informed moving forward on gems and bombs such as the one we had today. Have a great one and keep being awesome. Thanks for listening to The Real Estate Experience. If this has brought you any value, please subscribe and leave a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to me. Now go out there and crush it.